Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. And as you can see, you have many more individuals with you now than what you are used to in the past. And so if you've been on the channel for a while or have viewed the videos there, you're very familiar with Lucy. Um, Luis is one of the individuals that we've mentioned in a couple of formats, and we have yet actually to post the video that we did just to say to Anne Louise. And so that will be upcoming. You'll probably see that before you see this. And then, of course, Willows is out. And as I mentioned with the channel, is that we've a little while back we kind of picked a new direction, a collaboration with a little different format, and so we're going to play with that in a whole variety of ways as we move forward. And we feel that it'll be an enjoyable and I guess I'll use the word, even though maybe it's overused, expansive experience, for you guys as you interact with it as well. So yeah, so we're here today, and of course, as we always do, before we start the recording, there's always some banter that's going on with us. I guess I'll call it in the moment behind the scenes, and so we were doing that, of course. And so what we're going to do is we're going to kind of start with something that we were discussing earlier, and the way this will probably go is we'll each share, because again, as I've mentioned to you guys, with this with the individuals that we have here now, you have in Lucy and Louise, two individuals who've explored consciousness for many years, and have a very nice connection in that regard. And then with Willow, even though they are younger than the three of us, Willow's one of those individuals, and who, when they showed up on this planet and as they moved into their teenage years, chose not to close down their connection. And that connection is still quite open, compared to, those of us who are in our 40s, 50s, and beyond, and have widened it back up. But that's not the experience we had maybe in our teens and 20s and things like that. So it's a very nice mix of perceptions and perspectives on their interaction with themselves. So yeah, so what we'll do is the conversation that we had was kind of beginning with an observation that Lucy had made. So we'll kind of let Lucy say that again, and then we'll kind of just let it organically flow from that direction. So Lucy, why don't you go ahead?
Thank you. My question is about suffering and how we can understand it in the fullest way.
Suffering. Okay, such a big theme altogether, and certainly, we have all been trapped by it through our lives. So, largely, many belief systems that we have been exposed to, and to some good extent, suffering is really thought about the thing that purifies you, the thing that you're supposed to. That's supposed to be hard. No, you can't just get there easy. You know, uh, but some people just buy it completely. It's probably the victimization mentality that perpetrates it the most. This always happened to me. I have to, I can never get out of this, all of that sort of thing. But at its core, suffering is a shrinkage of who we are. And it is so constricted of all that we are that we just are habitating with fears, whether we can attach direct connection to a traumatic event or something we observe. Doesn't matter. You're just there with fear. Interestingly, in the conversation that we have been having here as we were waiting for Lucy to maybe get a better connection, we jumped from that to joy. We talked about joy. And so what that told me is that there is this direct connection between suffering and joy. It represents a path, a very important path of ascension, of movement, and that people need to uh, transcend the suffering because what is immediately available is in the domain of joy. Uh, I am, of course, personally interested in this subject of suffering from the perspective of seeing somebody and wondering, how can I help them? And when it comes to family, like let's say my mother, what in the world can I do to get her off her inability to get out of this visions and feelings that she has that are very centered on the negative things, and she suffers through them. And that would be good a good subject for me for sure.
Yeah,
Um,
I was just a moment ago, I kind of tapped Willow, wondering if maybe they had some input that they wanted to add.
Oh, I didn't know that's why you're tapping.
I know that what's interesting along those lines is that we happened to watch a film last night where this theme was front and center in the theme. Actually, it's a movie called Chocolat, so kind of an older film, and yeah, it was very much about how that particular way of living your life was the way that it was supposed to be done, you know. And so for me, and of course, as I'm hearing you, and as my thoughts are beginning to form, if you want to call them that, of course, D'setu is always up there adding stuff, and so the idea of the contrast between suffering and joy, uh, really, from the perspective of that other self of ours, that more encompassing us. There's no contrast there at all. It's really more of the spectrum of the expression of who and what we are, and even the idea that having that experience within this experience, because of course you really need to have an experience where you buffer yourself from the knowledge of who and what you are to have that kind of an experience. Still, though, it's a very valid experience because that is what we've done, is we've created this experience so we could have those types of experiences or explore them within it. And some don't, but some do. And some do in a very deep way, as Lucy was actually relating to us earlier. She has a family member that's explored it for the majority of her life. In other words, they've suffered, and especially from our perspective, it even without their input, we perceive them as suffering. And so some of that, of course, has probably got to do with our perspective on how life should be, on what a better life looks like, on what a better experience is. There's a story that's interesting that I'll relate just briefly that adds, I think, a little bit of insight to that. And I had a coworker one time talking about a trip that they took, and it was them and their wife and several other couples. And on the trip, there was one couple that argued all the time. The whole time they were there, they were fighting in various capacities, they were arguing, and to everybody else, it didn't seem like they were enjoying the trip at all because that's what they were doing. And then when the trip was coming to an end and they were all in the airport and they were speaking about the trip, there was some exploration about doing either this location or another location together again, all of them. And the couple that everybody considered to being having such a miserable time said, "Yeah, this was a great time. We loved it. Yeah, we would love to do something like this again." So it's an interesting thing how many times the perspective from outside the experience is not the same as what's actually going on within the experience, and the value fulfillment, to use a term that another has used, that is gained by those individuals through that experience. That again, because it's not the exploration that other people are desiring to have in that moment, they view it a little bit differently. Another example of this is something that Luis mentioned a short time ago, also, where as an individual, so we've begun, and again, those of you who are familiar know that this is occurring, but I'll just mention it to the viewers. D'setu is largely in attendance in the moment. So as you began this particular new millennium, and a little bit before that, um, what you began to do is something that you didn't do much of prior to that. So when you leave this physical experience and you go back into your non-physical experience, like you do when you move from one experience to a different dimension, and many things where there is a very different way of utilizing your consciousness, there's a transition phase that's utilized. So when you're born into this reality, you transition from understanding yourself as all of what you are, and to little by little by little by little seeing yourself as what you might consider to be the typical human experience, not considering what's going on with the shift now. So when you leave, you do something similar. There's a transition because you have a particular way of using your awareness within physical reality, and it changes into what's natural for you in your non-physical self. So what you began to do at the onset of this millennium, much more frequently, but you had done it a little before that, is you begin the transition process while you're still here, typically in what's called old age. And so you've come up with various medical terms for this particular expression, where what happens is that in transition, and again now in physical reality, you will view other segments of your life as if they are occurring right now. Because, of course, that is the experience that you have in transition. You see all of your experience at any time that you want to, it's all there simultaneously. Now, of course, the individuals around you don't have that experience. They're used to experiencing time in a particular flow in a very singular way. And so, those individuals who aren't experiencing that, there is something then that's considered to be wrong with them, shall we say. They have some illness or whatever that's creating that. And many times it is the feeling of the other individuals around them that the individual then tries to accommodate, and then embraces that expressed emotion to some degree themselves, if nothing else, just to project it back. In other words, the individual may have some awareness of what they're doing, or may not be disturbed at all by their experience, except through the responses they're getting from individuals around them. And so, again, the whole idea that the various experiences that people are having on your planet, including those that you call suffering, may not necessarily be experienced in the same way by the individual that you're perceiving. Because again, you perceive it through your filters, through your beliefs about what it should be, why it should be a particular way. There is, again, the idea that you have within your reality as you move towards a different experience, that that experience is a better experience than this one is. It is a more expansive experience, which indeed it will be, but you overlay that with the idea of it's better than the narrower experience, which again, it's not. It is only different than this experience. They are both a valid exploration of your consciousness. It's just you've chosen to do it a little differently. Now, yes, again, something Lucy mentioned a little bit earlier was that there may be those individuals that choose to explore those types of themes in their life to a greater degree than others do. And yes, that does in fact occur. Now, in your transition period, in this shift in consciousness that you're all experiencing now, you do have a freedom to alter those themes in a way that you didn't before, just as you have a freedom to extend the length of time that you spend in physical reality in a way that was rarely chosen in your 1800s and before that. Only those individuals who seem to be very deeply connected to consciousness seem to be able to do things like that for not typically the length of time that you will be able to do it, although much earlier, again, in terms of time, in your histories, you do have within some of your, you'll call them myths or stories, individuals who lived very, very, very long lives. And this, in fact, happened in those time periods. and you are moving into something again. What you will do now as you move forward, as long as you are interested in your experience still, you will continue in the experience and you will leave it behind because your fulfillment in that regard has come to a close, shall we say. So if you will forgive us, perhaps we'll say, for butting in, but and if there's anything else that somebody has that they would like to offer, either along that same line or something that was stimulated, and it feels like Willow may have something, we'll, of course, we're very eager to hear what that is.
Well, I just have a comment about the concept of suffering again, because to me, joy and suffering are the same exact energy, just being interpreted and translated in different ways in this experience. There's no, like you said, there's no value difference. It's the same exact energy, just with a different, I guess, definition or understanding of that energy. You're utilizing it in a different way. So, you know, circumstances that unfold around you uh, are the product of how you are translating that emotion or that energy into form, into physicality around you.
And we're going to ask, and in a very vague way, but because of our familiarity with Willow, we know that they had a very challenging period in their life. And they related to us once how within that challenge, they knew everything was going to be all right, even though others around them didn't see that. Maybe you might want to talk a little
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah. Well, throughout my life, I've had periods of time where I was in deep depressive episodes and eating disorder spells that lasted for a while. And during those moments, my family members saw me suffering deeply in their perspective, their perception of me. But in my experience, I was very much aware of the joyful, connective, expansive moments that were sprinkled in to my difficult times. And I they kind of balanced themselves out. There would be some challenge, but it wouldn't last for the whole day, let's say. Even if I'm feeling depression for most of the day, there would be these beautiful reminders of just, seeing the sunlight come through the window in a certain way, or listening to my favorite song over and over again, or picking up one of my dolls and getting comfort from it, where I was constantly reminding myself of my connection to more of who I was. And through that, but also through just my innate knowing and also dream time communications and stuff, I was often reminded of the the idea that this was just a chapter in my story, not the whole story, and that I'm just doing an exceptional job at playing out what it means to be depressed. Say that that's a role that I'm dressed up as, as a character in a play or something, some theatrical production, and I had to take on these qualities. And I could almost hear and imagine my higher aspects cheering me on and clapping for me, saying, "Oh, you're doing a fantastic job at being furious or at being depressed, at being miserable. You are like textbook definition of suffering. Great job." And it lightened the mood because I could feel in that moment just how silly all this was. I mean, not that it's invalid, but that it doesn't really define who I am. I can experience a moment of deep pain and suffering, but it doesn't take any of my value away. It doesn't mean that I've lost my connection. It doesn't mean I've lost my awareness. It doesn't mean that I've lost my sparkle in any sense. It just means I'm using my sparkle to create a very dim experience. So I never really lost that idea throughout all of my challenges. And my family members, they would see me in a state of very, very malnourished, very thin, very much looking like I'm on the brink of death. But in my experience, that's not how I experienced it. My body really didn't feel that bad. My dreams were so incredible. My connection with more of myself was right there. So no matter what my body went through, no matter what pain I experienced, it did not have any lasting effects on my uh, experience of who I am as a greater being. So there's that.
Nice. Luis, it feels like you have some follow up.
Yeah, I do. There's so many possible follows up, but the first one is to say that thank you for that sharing because it opens it up in many different ways to not only understanding this dynamic of suffering, perceptions, yours, the way you see it and the way that others see it, okay? But it also even connects with this notion that, every moment we're given a choice of where do we want to be? What do you want to choose? Doesn't matter where you have been, you know? It's where you are right now and how can you shift? Okay, so you were feeling depressed and the sun came through and that looked marvelous. And that was an invitation right there. You can jump out of that and come to, we got more, we're here, come to this. And I feel that that has happened in my life so many times, and I can remember specific times in which my life was full of turmoil and me getting in the car and riding it and stopping at a stoplight. And then there's a construction going on, and I start actually listening. Normally, you try to put that out, the machine breaking the concrete. I don't want to hear that. All of a sudden, I started listening and seeing the air that the machine itself was producing and the dust that was rising and actually being with that for, I don't know, whatever it was, a light changing. What could it be? 20 seconds or whatever it was. And knowing, that that was a sign that I was returning to a different reality and not the reality that of the turmoil that I was having at home and really everywhere as a result of a number of circumstances. Anyway, so that brought me to that. But the most fundamental thing that so far this discussion is beginning to show to me, you got suffering, you got joy, it's the same line, the same whatever. Uh, it's about accepting what's going on or resisting it. And that's what takes us, we dial out of the feeling of extreme suffering, depression, whatever, by flowing. It's just part of some process that we're going through. And that's why I feel that internally the person that supposedly is doing and going through these things and everybody is beginning to suffer. We're feeling you're in suffering, or we're suffering that you can't get out of that. Well, the other person, they're experiencing as a process, and you took it, Willow, to the next level, the theatrical thing. You felt like, you were acting this, oh, what a magnificent, you were getting that message, that is a perfect portrait of somebody that has extreme whatever, you know. It's all a simulation, right? And the purpose of it all is about what our feelings are. And through that, we are creating new worlds. And we decide ultimately to step into them.
Yeah. Yes.
But at the beginning, we have a hard time stepping into them because we're consumed by the fear of, I don't know. The unknown is to go there, even though we're experiencing it more and more, and we're creating it. We're creating this new thing, It's a chiseling process. It's a morphing process. It's all of these things, basically. Anyway, that's what I have.
And I think sometimes people try to force choices before they feel natural, because I think that is actually a step backwards when you're given maybe a glimmer of a new reality, a little glimpse into something that you can choose that would improve your quality of life. But if you have a feeling that it's not the right time to make such a big change, or you don't quite have enough confidence within yourself to take that next step, I've found that, like you said, going with the flow of your process through those dark times often will be the faster route in the end, because you're not leaping ahead before you believe you're ready. And that was important for me, because I would just wake up one day and feel like, oh, I'm ready to make some changes. I'm ready to view my life differently and to be kinder to my body and to sign up for this yoga class or something, do something new, do something different to break up the cycle I'm in. But if I were to make choices like that on a day when I was really deep in my experience, my theatrical experience of depression, that wouldn't really be very helpful. So I guess that's part of it as well, being very honest with yourself in those moments and not forcing a change before it feels like it's time.
You know,
One of the things that stimulates for me is kind of the idea of what I've become familiar with are some of the foundational ways that we do things here. So, this particular physical dimension is foundationally about one of the things is about the experience of emotion. It's woven through what we do. Emotion and feeling states are a part of everything. And so the thing is that when you come into your experience of that, especially in these time periods now, as we're working with beliefs like we are, if we're in the midst of having that experience, we try to distance that experience from us, then it wants to be replayed again and again and again because you didn't allow yourself to have that exploration of that emotion, which is what you're looking for. I think a part of that, which is maybe we could call it an artifact of our quote unquote history, is that we have this understanding and this belief that it's more powerful than we are, not really understanding that we're the ones that created the experience. We're the ones that create the emotions to experience them within the dimension, but it's our creation. And so really, there is nothing out there that's more powerful than we are. And along the lines of experience, I had something, I don't know, it's probably been a week ago now, where as I was laying down in bed to sleep, I had this scene that was popping up that was different than what I wanted things to be, different. And of course, it was another reality that I was becoming familiar with, and the emotions that were in it. And so what I initially was doing was attempting to set it aside and bring in what I would rather have things be instead. And it wouldn't go away. Kept coming back, kept coming back, kept coming back. And then finally I just embraced it. I just let it play out, let it on its own, like a dream does, expand and become whatever it was going to be, and let all the actions occur, and all that stuff occurred within my mind. When that happened, then the energy and the emotions shifted dramatically to what you might call a very different end of the spectrum. And then I was experiencing that instead, which was, in a sense, from the way that we would see it, an opposite way of having that particular type of an experience. Again, the understanding that really both of those experiences are being experienced by that wider us at the same time. And within the experience, we tend to separate those out, but really, as Willow was saying, they're just a different expression of the same energy. There really is no foundational difference to it all. It's just a way that we develop it within this dimension.
It's it's like right here, I have a piece of clay. This piece of clay can be sculpted into absolutely anything. It's the same energy, the same substance, but it can reflect whatever you put upon it. So same thing with
Yeah,
what you're just talking about.
yeah,
beautiful.
absolutely. And, one of the things that I've become familiar with through my association with D'setu and some others is that this shift of ours largely involves us neutralizing beliefs. And so,
Mhm.
really, in part, what emotions also do is they help you to identify what beliefs you're using in this moment.
Mhm.
Anger will help you do that. Frustration will help you do that. Sadness will help you do that. Joy, whatever. Any of those emotions will help you to identify the belief that you're using in this moment. Not that it's wrong, but just to identify it, especially in these times. Do you want to continue to use that particular way of filtering consciousness to have your experience? So, in that, the way we become familiar with that is to, as you were saying, Louise, and as Willow was alluding to as well, to not try to push the emotional experience away, but to experience it, embrace it, and to understand it then, if we can, while it's occurring.
It's like soaking up the experience so fully that there's nothing left for you to gain from it, and then you can move beyond it. Like, I personally haven't experienced depression for years now because I went through it so fully when I was in my teen years, and now it feels like there's no desire for me to recreate that, and there's no need for it. It doesn't even feel like it's in the cards for me at all because I would respond to such a situation in a very different way now because I've learned what it's like to respond without my power, and now I can respond knowing that I have the ability to create my reality differently. So it served a very powerful purpose, I think. It always does if you are there to receive it fully.
And I know that one of the things that sometimes we can forget is that This, of course, is a collaborative experience that we're all having. So sometimes we will create experiences not only for our own exploration, but for the exploration of those that are especially close to us, that we're important too, so that they have experiences that allow them movement or allow them an exploration of this dimension that otherwise they wouldn't have in quite the same way. So it affords that to individuals, as well as that ever-present concept of choice. How is it they choose to utilize, their way of viewing that circumstance in that moment? And what do they recognize about themselves as that's going on? So that it's so interactive. I know that especially on larger scales, when we have individuals around the planet that die all at one time, let's say a tsunami, washes a village away or whatever, those individuals, have in essence chosen to do that so that collectively we can understand that energy and through that really move a little bit closer to our sense of connectedness. Because really, when those things happen, even at a distance around the globe, we feel as individuals that that was a person, a human being that had that terrible thing happen, right? And we connect to them as another person, as another human being. Doesn't matter where they live at that moment, right? We just connect to them in that. And so I think it helps us to open up that background connectivity that's within us all the time. That again, within this movement, our shift, we're becoming more and more familiar with all the time. And of course, some people already have that quite a bit at the forefront.
It's an opportunity to amplify empathy with each other,
Right.
to really make that the primary response when a catastrophe happens, catastrophe, so to say, to respond just with compassion instead of anger, or just understanding that this is a collective agreement that was made among all these beings to experience that, and we can learn from it, what they are getting out of it. It's always a collaboration, and I think it could always be seen in a positive context.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And even it can help us, depending again on the way that we look at things, to move beyond fear. Fear again, as part of this movement, that understanding again that we're the ones that are orchestrating our experience around us, including that expression of consciousness that we call nature, because it's our expression as well. And so things don't happen just willy-nilly, of course. When you see things going on that are associated with a particular area of a country or a particular country, it does in fact have a lot to do not only with the collective, but of course with those individuals in that particular area quite a bit. And it's their emotional energy that's being expressed in a way, just like if you have an individual who's got something that's been bothering them for a long period of time and they're not allowing themselves to see it and to deal with it, then their body will express it, and as disease processes of various types. And so the energy, you can't hold energy. Energy is always flowing. It will be expressed. So the idea is, how will it be expressed? And so one of the ways that we express it on our planet is through weather, whatever it might happen to be, a sunny day, a hurricane, a tornado, a light breeze, a very strong breeze, wind that knocks over trees, many, many, many different ways. It's part of us also. So yeah, that idea of our connectivity to everything is something that in this process we're becoming increasingly familiar with, in part through the understanding of the way that we use emotions and belief systems together.
Perhaps Lucy would like to say a few things about this.
Well, I'd love for us to engage in a discussion of something that Luis raised, and that was the fear of the unknown, and working with that to come to another place where we're actually able to address the unknown with curiosity, excitement, openness, because we know that we are eternal beings. We fear nothing, basically. Curious what the rest of you have to say about this topic.
So it is interesting because by and large, and again, this is a lot of D'setu in the moment, but by and large, that concept of getting used to unknown is from this perspective. In other words, from the perspective of being the human being, the physical expression of you, and what is outside of you, shall we say, that you're unfamiliar with. But really, the situation actually is that what you're used to is the non-physical you, the you that's always in connection with all parts of itself. It's this experience, the physical experience, where you have experientially sequestered yourself from the rest of who and what you are. This is the unknown experience. And it's actually that lends itself to those other hesitancies you have, to those other fears and hesitations of doing things that are unknown, because you are in a very different experience than what actually you are used to as the eternal you. This is a very strange thing for you to experience. And so, but of course, Lucy's point is well taken as well, that as you begin to trust, especially yourself, and of course, that means all of who you are, which includes, of course, that part of you that knows itself as the unlimited and eternal aspect of yourself. That and how involved the collaboration between this you and that you is in all the experiences that you're having. It is paramount to that. And so to slowly become familiar with that helps you to trust in your experiences, regardless of what they are, because of course you understand that that collaboration and all the ways that it's occurring is why you're having the experiences that you're having. Now, of course, there's a connection with the rest, the collective, and the ideas of what this dimension is about. Those are there, of course, in the background foundationally. But how you utilize that stage and the experience you have within that stage are about the way that you and the rest of you are moving through that experience moment by moment by moment.
And I was just reminded there actually is a inherent trust that we have in the unknown, because everything in our lives originated in the so-called unknown. I mean, process of growing up, the process of every single experience that happens before our eyes, everything that pops up in our reality was previously unknown by this perspective of ourselves, but we trust it enough to keep going with it. I mean, every single moment that passes us, I guess, was once an unknown moment. So there's this collaborative interaction that we're having with the unknown, as if the unknown was a being itself. We're just so very trusting of it and embracing of it, but we may not look at it that way. But I think that's kind of what's going on the fundamental level. Because it is us, like you said. That's why. We can't ever be separate from yourself. So it dresses up as something that you can't even identify, can't even fathom, you can't even come up with it in any way. So it is represented by this emptiness, this unknown, this unfamiliarity, because it's every possibility that has yet to be lived is encased within the unknown. And that's a really big thing. That's a lot of unknown, a lot of possibility. That's all wrapped up in one idea. So no wonder it seems intimidating and kind of scary, because it represents unlimited potential.
Mm-hmm. Louise, it seems like there's something.
Yeah, we seem to be very focused on things that have to do with our external reality, where the concept of the unknown is a lot more restricted, because immediately we applied all the filters of I can do this, I cannot do that, or whatever. So I would like to say that when I hear fear of the unknown, then I'm really thinking foremost about fear of how am I going to be accepted if I do that? How are others going to react if I do that? How do and my health and my livelihood and my this and my, how does it, I don't know. I don't know. I'm not clear. And, no, I don't want to risk myself doing anything different. The old adage, don't leave the old job before you have the new one, so to speak. those kinds of things. Yeah, we are infinite beings, and the unknown is we come from the void, and uh, really, but in the existence that we have daily, we have all of these interactions, and we are drawn to see it through the basic senses and drawn out of these moments of great connection with the true essence of what we really are. Now, what do I see that can help that? You could say on a simple scale, while the focus, it's what others think, and okay, forget about that. What I see is bringing more of the power of that unknown that you are. You are unknown, really. To bring some of that, and what I see is a continued merging with this thing that we can call the higher self, or whatever, I am presence, whatever you want to call it, Holy Spirit for some, whatever, to bring it into the kind of status that Charles has with D'setu, where it's right there, and so there's a immediate nurturing and caring and an immediate force that basically saying, hey, this is all gonna be fine. Everything is truly to your advantage, although it may not seem that. Okay? Everything needs to be experienced. We have said that in different contexts a little bit here earlier. Everything needs to be experienced so that we become capable of moving to other experiences. We understand enough about this that we can move to some other ones. We're distilling, in effect, into this realm from the immensity of what we are, where we really know everything and we can be anything. We're trying to collect some things that we can put into practice here. And the challenge of the unknown is the challenge of what is it that I'm at risk? Because we still have a fear of death. We still have a fear. Nobody likes to be involved in an accident, right? That they have to put you in the hospital for 3 months or something like that. So we still have those thoughts somewhere. Okay. Whether it's the survival, the livelihood, or, maybe you're in a family that you say, I don't accept anything they do, so what are you going to do? Okay. You're going to go your way. You say goodbye to all of them. Okay. Are you ready for that? There's a fear always about those kinds of things. So it's this lower domain that needs the assistance of whatever we can kind of bring from the rest of what we are to be present. And how, if it's just a little bit more that is present, I think we're tipping the scales to the point where now we have this instinctive nature that says, my intuition is connected to that, and I will know what I need to do no matter what happens, and accept the fact that everything is truly to my advantage. Can't see it yet, but I know because I trust this connection, and it's here. And if I need a little bit more, I take the few minutes and try to bring it myself a little more into it. Just my thought.
Yeah, I especially at the end, as you tied that up, that's exactly the way that, I've become familiar with that whole process. In our process, in the shift that we're going through, part of that transformation is moving from utilizing what a lot of people typically call the ego, um, which is that part of us that does just that, focuses with most individuals out there on the world around you first. And some individuals also experience what's going on within them. But the concept being that you have to have all the information as much as possible about all the things that are going on around you to try to then move through life in a way that's going to benefit you. There can't be any surprises, right? Because you have to manage everything, with the tools that you have. And if you don't have enough tools, then you have to acquire those tools, right? So you can do a better job at managing your reality, because it's up to you to manage that reality versus what you were expressing a little later on as you tied things up, the concept that there is a you that sees the entirety of the reality, that can bring those things that benefit you into your life without needing to go out and get them in particular ways. They just show up in your life in ways that many times are unexplainable. And to start to trust that, to rest in that, people call it synchronicity, a lot of times, or whatever, they might say miracles, depending how big it is, whatever it might happen to be. But the concept that, really, and Willow mentioned this a little bit when they said how much we trust just growing up into our life, and becoming who we are. We forget, or maybe I can use the term, condition ourselves out of that as we move into our adulthood, because we have a model of life that used to be, well, still is probably the prevailing model, and how you need to then approach life, where it can't be this, oh, you just have fun with life and you just, let yourself move in whatever direction you want to in life. It has to be structured because now you have to take control of life. Well, the whole idea with all of this is understanding that really, in essence, that's never been the case anyway. That life has always shown up for you from those deeper parts of yourselves in alignment with the beliefs that you had that you needed to control your life. So once you loosen those beliefs up and understand that there's always been a process around you that's been bringing you your life, and learn how to steer yourself through that, and maybe what we can call in this moment a little bit more of an effective manner, because we're always doing it effectively. Maybe more of an aware manner might be a better way to say it. Now you're aware of that process, more at the forefront of who you are, and so now you can use the process, and you don't have to try to control it all from yourself, because that that more expansive you is out there pulling in all the resources that are needed for whatever it is that you would like to experience in that particular flow of moments. So yeah, I think it's a very different outlook, and one that I think all of us um, not only have embraced to a large degree in our life, but we're also familiar with a growing number of individuals that are recognizing that and embracing it in their life, uh, you know, whether it's a little at a time or sometimes in larger chunks, however that might happen to go. But yeah, very much so. It's a very, very nice observation.
And I'm sure for pretty much everybody, um, there's quite a lot of compartmentalization with the areas of our lives that we feel more trusting of unknown aspects versus the places that feel completely untouchable because the fear is too big. But there's many times where we just forget to be afraid. There's an experience that you desire so strongly that there isn't any fear. You just jump into it head first because you want it so bad. You don't really care what happens. So if we had that approach to everything that happened in our lives, it'd be a completely different experience. And I think there would be a lot more, I don't know, there would be a lot more of every kind of emotion going on, but at least there wouldn't
Yeah.
be the resistance to
You
having
know,
something new show up.
you have that tarot card, the zero, the fool. So it's the beginning of a journey, major arcana. It's actually a metaphor for our journey. So you start being, quote, a fool, okay? But one of the great characteristics of a fool is they can be fearless. And in being fearless, they will try many things and find gold in
Right.
some of them. Okay. So in some decks, the fool is the zero card, and then you have your traditional 21 major arcanas, and then they put an extra card at the end, and is another fool card. But this fool card is the one that have experienced that complete cycle of all those things in that we are through life. The teacher, the transformer, the mystic, the power kind of, the guy that can control everything perfect, all those kinds of things, including the connecting heaven and earth kind of guy, the temper human, all those things. You have gone through all those cycles. And so at the end, usually, what it ends up in the universe card. In other words, everything is available to you. You're master of your world, whatever. But then there's this other card in some decks that is again a return to the Fool, which signifies it's all a cycle and you're going to go through another cycle. But in this cycle, in the particular deck that I'm thinking right now, the Fool has a book in their left hand, and that is the book of what they have learned. They're not going to the next cycle without some very good information about themselves. And the cycle continues. Okay. So I don't know why, but you
Yeah,
you
so it's
evoke
nice.
that.
Yeah, because really, in a sense, to me, that kind of speaks of, like you were saying, the continual exploration that consciousness is involved in, always
Always,
exploring itself.
always.
And the ability then to utilize what we can call, from this perspective, past experiences to then utilize in whatever way they want to, because it's all available, to whatever new creation they want to involve themselves in. So, yeah, it's a very cool continuation of that cycle process. Very interesting.
Thank you.
So,
And the theatrical thing that Willow has brought a couple of times, it's so powerful. We are the best actors. And if you heard any story about any world-renowned actor and how they get in their parts and how they make this phenomenal performance that people say, wow, wow. And you talk to the crew members that were involved in the creation of whatever film or a theatrical presentation, they're going to tell they were unbearable during the time that they were in this production because they were 100% all the time in character. That was the only way. They had to embody everything that they have come to study, some of it, but somehow some of it downloaded straight to them. They connected to the energy of that part. And that is what we do. That is exactly what we do.
and I think what's interesting to me is I think that, of course, within us someplace is that knowledge that we're all actors in this experience. And so, to me, that's one of the reasons why we value actors so much, and they get paid what they do, and they're considered to be so popular because they're an expression within the physical experience of what we're all doing. We're all actors within a play of a sorts. There was something else, but it's gone for the moment. And I feel Willow's got something. So
And there's so many levels of this play pretend experience that we have, because even in our societal experience, we mimic and mirror each other. We act based on what other people are doing around us. We base our personalities off of who we've grown up around. So, and also with neurodivergent individuals who are either autistic or have ADHD, there's a process called masking where you kind of structure an artificial persona that you put on when you're in social situations or um, in any environment that you don't feel completely comfortable to be yourself around for whatever reason. So there's these various characters that we flip through day to day, sometimes multiple in one day or in one conversation. You can put on these different costumes, these different characters. And I think we've gotten so adept at that process that we don't even realize we're doing it a lot of the time. And yeah, so I guess the more that we accept that that's a part of our exploration here, maybe the acceptance of it will make all those characters kind of not need to be so what's the word, distinct or so different from one another. There won't be a need for this whole um like photo album full of different characters that we've played. Maybe they don't need to be quite so diverse, but maybe they do. It depends on the situation, but it could go either way. What are your
I have
thoughts?
always noticed in my own ways of being throughout the ages that I was a different actor in every interaction that I had with different people. I was not exactly the same person,
yeah,
you know?
Yeah.
I know that there are distinct themes that I played out at various time periods of my life, shall I say, And one of the things that popped in as we were talking about the earlier subject matter was one of the other things that strikes me in that regard was like sports individuals, get paid a huge amount for doing what it is they love to do, you know. And people who are musicians, especially if they become popular, again, whether pop artists, rock and roll people, whatever, it's very similar. So I think we use those individuals again to remind us of, how we can approach this reality, that it can be uh, a very fun, exciting, inspiring way to approach our reality. And at the same time, as long as we're still interacting with those particular mediums, you can still have lots of money in your life, to do the things that you want to do, that interact with that. So,
Passion will bring that for
yeah.
sure. And let me say this right here, right now. Are we having fun?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And Chuck, you just touched the last one. You can have anything you want. Once you're in that state, you can have anything. Whatever you need, you can make it happen.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I think one of the things that I've become familiar with through this process of the exploration within the context of linear time, of course, is to be transparent with yourself in those regards, because a lot of times what can happen with individuals is that they have a different type of an exploration that really in their heart they feel they want to do, but they can fall into the ideas of individuals around them as far as how they maybe should be carrying out their exploration or whatever. Where oh my gosh, it's like really I should be able to, with all this enthusiasm and all this inspiration and the desire that I have and everything else, I should be able to attract all this money into my life. But really, what they might want inside of themselves is to have a very quiet life, and they want to live in the woods, and they want to just interact with nature. And their inspirations are that it doesn't so much have to do with anything or any variation of that, where I think the bottom line again is what really feels natural for the individual,
Right.
if they're transparent with themselves.
What you're naturally passionate will
Yeah,
bring forth that which is naturally appropriate for you. And in that sense, you're infinite wealth, infinitely abundant.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, you know,
Huh.
Abundance comes in many different forms as well.
comes in many
It is
different
like
forms.
beautiful.
Absolutely.
Well, again, that's one of the things. Various individuals who share information sometimes drop little gems, right? And well, many times actually. And so Bashar, that individual, drops one in that regard, where they say you're always abundant in whatever it was that's going on. You're just abundant in that particular thing. You can be abundant in struggling, or you can be abundant in grief, or whatever lack. You can have an abundance of lack. Whatever it might happen to be. So yeah, we're incredible creators. Again, there's individuals use language of I need to learn how to manifest. You don't need to learn how to manifest. You're doing it in every moment of your existence. What is helpful is to become more familiar with how you manifest. That can be helpful, but you're already doing it. Otherwise, you wouldn't be having the experience that you're having.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Beautiful. I
So
had
to
another
me,
thought about
go ahead.
suffering, which was sort of the subject we started. Thank you, Lucy. And that is that sometimes suffering is an acting job for somebody that cannot find any other way of getting love from their perspective.
Sure.
They're demanding it. I demand attention. Okay. And they create all of these things. And of course, in that, they have to, go through real uh, acting of what suffering is. Anyway,
And there are cues in our society that reinforce those too, that sometimes those people will pick up on that maybe other people's won't. So let's take healthcare. So when you have something wrong with you, all of a sudden there are people taking care of you. I mean, to the degree where there are hospitals and things like this built so that individuals can go when they're sick, but you wouldn't be in that situation with those individuals attending to you if you weren't in that condition, if you weren't sick. So if an individual was working with those beliefs that they thought that just because they were who they were, that they could have people caring for them, they could have those types of interactions that they wanted to have with individuals, then they can look for those, as you mentioned, those other ways of doing it. And to them, as uncomfortable as a condition may be, still it affords them what they really desire, which is that interaction, because there's something inside of them that believes that that's only through that particular interaction that they'll be able to get that they won't be able to get it in other ways. So yeah, absolutely.
thank you. What an honor to be here.
Yeah, yeah. So it feels to me like we've kind of tied up the natural flow of what we're going to do today. If it feels like that to you guys. And so from my end, what I want to do is just say how much I appreciate Lucy and Luis's and Willow's joining us here today, and this incredible collaboration that we have moving forward into whatever we're going to do with it. I think we're going to have a lot of fun, as we were talking about earlier in our expression. And through that, there'll be a lot of really cool stuff that'll be expressed by all of us, collaboratively and individually. So, yeah. Any of you guys have any closing little tidbits that you want to mention before we tie it up?
I think that we are more connected heart to heart than ever. And that is a beautiful thing. And thank you.
Yeah,
Happy to
absolutely.
be here.
So this is, thank you, Lucy. So this is for all of you watching, where we'll end the recording. And so we will see the rest of you next time around, and you'll never know what the mix may be, and we'll find that out when we next say hi to you. So we hope your exploration is fun and it's fulfilling to you in whatever way it may be, and we'll see you next time around.